range of ideas out and understanding what will be the way to progress them.
Kia ora. I think also of relevance will be what I understand is imminent treaty settlement negotiations around harbours, etc. So that's going to be another, I suppose, relevant.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity and a challenge. Yep,
yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. And
right.
I was going to question, but I think having a working group with an IMSB representative on it might be the space to do that. But because I don't have a sense of the foundation of the island plans as to how well, mana whenua, mātāwaka were engaged in that process, that's a question I have. But I think the establishment of the working party may well be the place to kind of explore those kind of matters.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Warren, great work.
Thank you.
More progress there. We'll go now to page 11 and I'll move the A, B and the C.
Second.
Invite Tony Reedy to come up. Councillor Walker will second. Tony, thanks for this update. Got a few big outstanding ones amongst the 23, but you want to just briefly, we've read the report, but take us through the maybe the key ones that have been resolved, and I can see a couple of key ones that are unresolved, and I think you might have some pending timeframes for one or two of those.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. As you'll see from the table, we were waiting on 12 have actually been heard by the courts. We're just waiting on the decisions, and they're imminent, probably in the next few weeks to month, because they were heard some time ago. So we're waiting to hear decisions on that. Rural appeals will be particularly of interest, Okura as well. And of the appeals that have been resolved recently, we had the South Family Trust appeal and the Gok family, that's Crater Hill, Pukaki Peninsula. Unfortunately, we were successful in the Environment Court, but that has now been appealed to the High Court, so it's ongoing there. That's what we're finding with some of the appeals. We've been successful in the Environment Court, and there have been subsequent High Court appeals, so it's sort of prolonging the process slightly. Also, the Ryman Health Care appeal, that means we're now, the residential chapter of the unitary plan is now fully operative, so all the appeals relating to the residential section have been resolved. Cool. That's probably another key point.
Thank you. Can we just, there's a Court of Appeal one that's outstanding, though the appeal hasn't been lodged. What limitation is there on that leave that's been granted to lodge that appeal? It's Mr. Franco Belgiorno.
I know he had the time frame was till the end of last week, so we'll probably be finding out in the next few days whether he did follow that through. It was a timing issue. He had until the end of May to lodge it.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's great to see the operative plan just grow by the month. We're getting there. Not
quite there, but nearly.
But we've got some big ones in there, particularly the rural subdivision. Okura in the north is a big decision, and of course there are other very important matters as well. And we have some challenges back through the High Court following decisions. So that's to be expected. It's all part of the process, and we just have to be part of the process.
That's great.
So put that to the vote, I think, unless there's anything outstanding, members. All those in favour say aye.
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 Contrary, no.
Thank you.
Declare that carried. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks a lot.
Then we go to 12, and Member Simpson, you would like to move. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Councillor Cooper would second. And I'll just get the right staff up here. Who have we got? No?
Must be straightforward.
I just pause a minute.
I've sent him a text and he's not here.
Pause a minute. Tell you what, how about we just park that one and we'll go to 13. Now, I don't think this needs support from, well, just... Here's the grants team. Hey, you grants team. Come on up. Mary and Samantha?
Yes.
Thank you. We've received your report and it's very thorough and your recommendations are clear. The criteria you use are absolutely perfect. Thank you for that. And we've moved the motion and we've had it seconded. Councillor Simpson has moved and Councillor Cooper has seconded the motion. Moved and seconded. So is there anything that you would like to add to the written report?
No, I don't think there's anything we need to add.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, do you?
No, I just want one question. Do you think the regional grant pot is large enough considering the amount of applicants and the amount of money we are giving out?
Probably not. So I think there are conversations right now about ways to increase the budget for the regional round.
82,000 is a very small regional grant, Mr. Chairman.
You're correct. If I can just say, members, when this paper came before myself and Councillor Hills, I questioned why a full committee would be receiving a paper on its agenda, which probably costs at least a couple of $1,000s just to write the paper. And for us to be sitting around making a decision on the granting of $82,000. I didn't think it was such a good use of our time. The staff have said, well, that's what needs to be done this time, and we're doing it this time. But there is the possibility of an increased fund. And I think if that fund does become more substantial, then I think we should have oversight of it at this planning committee. My suggestion, though, if we did not make a decision at a future finance committee, then it is more appropriate for staff to make decisions on a sum of $82,000, as it has been for the last couple of years. But there is the possibility, not confirmed, that there will be a paper coming to finance on whether this council wants to consider a larger grant fund.
Okay, you've said that there are conversations and that's good enough for me. We'll wait and see what happens with the annual plan. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, speaking to that, Mr. Chairman, because I did actually allude to this, the issue more broadly of heritage during the LTP process. So I am encouraged to hear that there may be something coming through. Should the amount available for distribution remain the same, I would still want to see it coming back here, because it's often only at a councillor level, or perhaps members of the IMSB would concur, that you can actually see how those funds might be leveraged. And they can actually make quite a significant difference in communities around the heritage issue. So, I mean, I'll await this paper that's coming, but I do think some governance oversight is really important, because these are not large sums of money, but they may contribute to something much larger. So I'd like to feel that there is the oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Take that point on board. Important. Terrific guidelines. I know these were probably written some time ago, but I just totally acknowledge the way you follow those guidelines. You've reflected those guidelines in the assessment of each and every one, and you've followed those guidelines to the letter. And your attachment B is a very clear articulation of how each of those applicants measured up, and that's commended. Thank you very much. Great work. Moved. Anything else, members here? It's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. 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 Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you.
Well done, girls.
Now, this one doesn't need John here, does it? Members, we need to go to 13 and bring this matter up you'll be aware that Councillor Sayers has resigned from the political reference group, the Structure Planning Political Reference Group. And so the political reference group is dealing with structure plans, which of course lead into plan changes. It's very important. It's about where people live and housing affordability. It's in the Drury South area, Pairata. We've got that well covered. It's in Warkworth North and Silverdale Dairy Flat. They're the key areas. So I'll put those motions before us, but we probably need to look at how we reinforce the spatial planning, the structure planning political reference group with another representative from here.
I'll nominate Councillor Wayne Walker if he's available.
Nominate him. It's always good to have a willingness.
Yeah, I'll
Is there
second that.
You'd like to be on it, Councillor
No, I'm
Walker?
seconding that.
Oh, I need to get the acceptance of the councillor first. Has this been canvassed, has it?
Yeah, they worked out a sneaky little deal before the council meeting.
No,
I,
no, not at all.
I prayed on this issue about 15 seconds ago.
Councillor Walker, would you be
Getting all religious on
prepared
us.
to,
It's completely
it does take
weird.
in
Fridays.
a little bit of
Yes, you,
Silverdale.
Linda.
It's complete news to me, Mr Chair. I can assure you that there hasn't been any communication that I'm aware of prior.
Well, Councillor Newman's very good with his emails, and I'm sure
So
there's one in your
I'm-
inbox.
I mean, I'm comfortable. Obviously, I don't know when and how often this particular group meets, but subject to my availability, I'm comfortable.
We meet for probably once every 6 weeks, approximately,
For about 2 hours.
for about 2 hours.
On a Friday.
Yep. Okay.
Speak now, if you ever hold your peace.
So, am I hearing an acceptance there, Councillor Walker?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure as to my availability on an ongoing basis. I'm making the assumption that a lot of the information is digital and it goes backwards and forwards. I don't know. I don't know how you operate, Mr Chair.
Well, the
Whether you
meeting
even operate
is
remotely.
in a room with our staff, and we thrash the things out. And it's a good, healthy group, actually. It's got some good people in it. So you're most welcome to participate,
Yeah.
if you would accept.
Do you have alternates?
No, there is a real need to have some consistency.
Yeah, consistency.
No, I'm just making the observation that Councillor Watson might be available as an alternate, if there were an issue.
Happy for that.
I think we need consistency.
Okay,
'cause
I'm not suggesting that there isn't consistency, Mr Chair.
Listen, we'll pay you more if you come on it, will you?
Oh, does that mean you pay less if you go off?
Councillor Casey.
So I've said yes, Mr Chair.
That's good.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
A question?
Yes.
It was really through the chair to ask Councillor Sayers about the email that's appended on page 527. I'm a member of the Strategic Procurement Committee. I'm not a member of Audit and Risk, but I do attend the meetings, and I don't know anything about the Structure Planning Political Reference Group. But I just wondered if he could make any statements regarding his statement, quote, "my comfortability of their operations." Is that anything to do with the Strategic Procurement Committee, which I'm on, or the Audit and Risk Committee, which I attend?
I don't really want to oblige Councillor Sayers to answer that here. It's not normal that a councillor in a meeting like this asks a question of another councillor, but it's totally up to Councillor Sayers. I'm not, and Councillor Sayers,
I think that's been addressed with the Mayor directly. It's also been debated with the governing body committee. I think I'll just leave it where I left it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, councillors, it has been discussed whether there should be a list of, which committees, which councillors are participating on, over and above the standard governing body and committees of the whole, just to give a bit of a sense of where people are working within council, who's participating and working in particular areas, just to give some visibility to the public of the work we're doing, and probably to ourselves as well. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr Chair. You read my mind. I was just going to suggest that that might be a good idea. I've read Councillor Sayer's email, but I am just worried that we are concentrating the work into fewer and fewer hands. You know, for those of us who are here from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, at least pretty much every day, I'm worried about the workload that some of the councillors are taking up. So I'm not too sure, with the greatest of respect, should we not ask for a valid reason? I don't know why Councillor Sayers is turning this down, and
Point of order.
Well, hang on,
point
I'm
of
just
order, Mr Chair. Point of order.
I need to take the point
It's
of
a
order.
question.
Point of order. It is irrelevant. I refer you to Standing Order 1.7. It's irrelevant. This is about appointing somebody to the committee, not the reasons of my resignation. I would ask for an apology and withdrawal by Councillor Hulse.
It's a good
I
point of
don't,
order.
look, I'm not sure whether I heard a criticism. I heard a question. I heard a question, Councillor Sayles. I didn't hear a criticism.
Question is irrelevant, Mr Chair. Ask for your ruling on it or take advice.
I think it's fair to, for the member to ask the question, because there is actually a reason given in the email, and the councillor is permitted to ask a question on anything that is before the meeting, and that is on the agenda. And I just had to have that on the agenda. I don't really need to pursue that any further.
I think the reason why, and I certainly won't withdraw and apologise, I think it's an entirely reasonable issue to raise, given the fact that some of the most busy areas in our entire region are going to be up in this particular council's area, where structure planning is going to be one of the most important pieces of work going forward. And I'm just a little bit concerned that we are a voice down for a particular area. So that was my reason. I just wondered if there was a conflict or an issue. It's just unclear to me in the email from the councillor why the resignation is taking place, and I restate my concern that fewer and fewer councillors are doing more and more of the work, and I think your idea of actually having a list of who's doing what is really important. Everyone has times where they have illness or family issues or other considerations. I didn't see that raised here.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, can we give your office the job of just constructing that list of, because I think you were doing some work in that area, maybe related to it?
That's the mood of the meeting, Mr Chair, certainly.
Thank you. Can we just note that? I don't think it needs a motion or anything like that. And can we just, in the B, can we delegate it to the, if it is required, to the Chair and Deputy Chair? And Councillor Simpson?
Mr Chairman, I was just going to make a comment on the listing of who's on what committee. And just, I wanted to make the point that it's the Mayor who initially asks people to be on those committees. So in some respects, I take the point, a little people on it a lot, but in some respects it is the Mayor's call. And it is always, as councillor, your call as to how you feel that impacts your workload. So I'm just a little bit nervous about, it looks as if this is the Mayor's ask, Just be very careful what we're doing here. And the Mayor's not in the room. He hasn't got the right to reply either. So just, he does determine, it's one of his only delegations. He does determine who's on what.
Can I just correct you in part? The Mayor does so for the committees of the whole. I think there might be maybe one or two others, but this is a call of the Planning Committee.
So this is a little bit different, but you were talking about who's on what,
It's just a summary, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just making the point that even those other committees, like he's put me on things that, I haven't necessarily volunteered for, but it is his decision who he asks to be on those committees.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Newman.
Yeah,
So we have a mover and a seconder as we've got there now. Who moved it? Yourself, Councillor Newman. Sorry to interrupt. It is moved and seconded by Councillor, was it Philippino?
No, it's Casey.
I'm happy to move this motion. I'm happy to move the resolutions under 13. Chair, I actually am not quite sure why attachment A on this report was necessary. I would have thought that there was simply a resignation, and that the process here was an appointment. I think that the email was probably unnecessary and could be unhelpful. I want to say that with respect to the structure planning political reference group, it has been a very useful forum for a discussion about issues that will have to inform the structure plan, which then drives the subsequent plan change that will be required. For my own participation in that reference group, actually the areas in the south which are affected are not in my ward. They are right on the boundary, but I have been, and officers will attest to this, I have been all over this matter because I see it as critical, not only from a perspective of a ward councillor affected, but this is a regional issue. But even for those councillors who are not on the reference group, there is ample opportunity to avail themselves of the officers who will be informing the structure planning process, and I'm sure that Councillor Sayers will do that because he is fastidious in addressing matters pertaining to Rodney. I just want to make a comment, Chair, about the availability of councillors and their workloads and what have you, and just say that I think that this ought to be treated with some caution, because there is a risk here that this becomes a bit of a straw man for reflecting people's comments about colleagues, whether they like colleagues or not. The presumption is that every colleague around this table works hard to the best of their ability for the betterment of their constituents and Auckland, whether or not people like them. You know, democracy means that the people are always right. So I would, I would say that if there is going to be a sort of an attendance list, a sheet of who's doing what, where they're doing, my question would be, for what purpose does that information exist, and what is the context for that information? And it better be informed, I suspect, by the work that people are doing beyond that list, because I'm sure that that information sheet will not contain everything that everyone else is doing. And I can say that beyond all the work that I do with the committees and forums and groups that I'm part of, there's a packet load of stuff that I'm doing that is and there'll be lots and lots of people around this organisation who will be aware of how hard I'm writing them in terms of service issues and maintenance issues in my part of the world. So I'm happy to move this recommendation, Chair, but I hope that this isn't a Trojan horse for an unhelpful discussion about the sorts of activities that colleagues are doing, because if that's what this is about, then I can guarantee there will be people that will reflect on that in terms of what they think about individual councillors, and there'll be other councillors who will say that that's not appropriate, that's just frankly heading into the realm of unhelpful politics.
Okay, thank you. And no, it's not a Trojan horse, and over the weekend somebody approached me, just as by example, said, oh look, I need you to sort this, and I realised, well, no, I'm pretty sure there's a specific working group that looks at that item, right, but I'm not on it, and I could not think of who was on it, and I couldn't find a document that actually guided me to who are the names that are responsible for that particular body of work. So that is as simple as it is, and I don't expect it to be more than that.
Okay.
Thank you. Member Hanare.
Kia ora. We don't have any problem with A and B, but I think we may have a problem with being the like the spare wheel in a family dispute. And my you know, and I hear what people are saying, and I haven't even read the email. I don't even know what the email you're talking about.
Page 527.
Yeah, I don't want to read it, quite frankly, because I actually don't believe that it's actually anything to do with the Independent Māori Statutory Board. I actually think it's got something to do with you councillors, and you need to take it offline and go somewhere, either dark or bright, and talk about it. And if it needs to be done, then it will be done. And if it doesn't need to be done, then it won't be done. And I'm sure that there's information out there of which committee, who's on and who's not, just by looking. But I feel, and I think my colleague, we feel rather uncomfortable with a debate about an issue that belongs to you guys, not to us. So we'll support, you know, somebody going on a working group, no problem. If that's the wish of the committee. But the other stuff, that ain't part of the planning committee. That's not our buzz. So I'd like to let you know that how uncomfortable we feel about being piggy in the middle.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To a degree, Councillor Simpson has raised what I wanted to raise, and that is, if you are going to depart from just an appointment which is relevant to the planning committee, it is more the domain of the mayor, and it should be, if it's to go wider, it should go to the governing body. So if it is the intention that people want that kind of information, or they want to have a more general discussion about governance, I would suggest that we actually have a paper brought to the governing body. You would not, you'd feel me remiss if I didn't remind you on occasions that I think that we could be handling our time more effectively in a governance sense. We have had, with the build-up to the LTP and the adoption of the Auckland Plan today, there has been a need for a lot of workshops and so forth. But I believe that we could conduct the business of the council on a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, perhaps going later in the evenings on some of those evenings, therefore enabling people to be able to have one day at least a week where they can actually dedicate to constituent issues that will arise from time to time. So I don't want to delay the time of this committee today, but I don't believe it's the domain of the planning committee to start having directives to the Deputy Mayor. I think it's an issue that should be taken up with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, but for it to come back through the governing body if you're going to start looking at issues, workloads and allocations. So I hope that we just adopt A and B today and get on with it.
That's the intention. Yep. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure, I've got a few points to make, Mr. Chair. And the first is that, well, certainly I agree with the comments that Councillor Fletcher made, and I would suggest that yes, it is desirable to have a paper brought to a governing body meeting around the general issue of appointments. My own experience is that there's quite a degree of hypocrisy, inconsistency and lack of protocols around this matter. And just dealing with that, any appointment of mine to this reference group, and in fact any other reference group, is contingent on my being appointed by the Mayor to the Weed Management Political Working Party, which I have requested in the past, which I led out in an earlier term of council, and I continue not to be on that. I take that as a significant slight. So I just want to reiterate that my appointment is contingent on that. And I would hope that the Mayor, if he's listening, takes it on board, because if that's not the case, really I'm not interested in going on to something, because I have raised that with the Mayor. As far as the issue around councillors' attendance and the hours that they put in and the like are concerned, I'm mindful, because I was a Rodney District Council for I think a good decade, longer than that, that if ever there is an area in Auckland where there are considerable distances that you have to travel. Sometimes it would take me more than 2 hours to get from one part of the ward to another, sometimes nearly 3 hours, which was pretty considerable. A huge geography, almost half of the region. Significant issues right now amongst community groups, very significant issues that I'm certainly aware of because I'm on the periphery of that area and part of what was Legacy Rodney. So I'm very mindful that those sorts of things need to be taken into account, and I would hope that there is not any slight on the present councillor for Rodney, because my observation is that there is a significant quota of effort being applied. So I just want to raise those issues because I don't know when there is a possibility of raising those issues or where there is a possibility of raising those issues. And certainly in respect of the point that I make around consistency or inconsistency, if we're going to apply some rigour around hours and attendance and what people do, then let's have a good hard look at that and put all the cards on the table, because presently they're not on the table.
Councillor Watson.
And that concerns me if there is a slight made to particular people on this committee.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I don't really want to prolong this matter. We should really just go straight to the vote, but just a couple of points. I can remember in the last term of council where there's any number of people who just disappeared from committees, often from fairly flimsy reasons, but that certainly wasn't any big deal or caused any great furore as we're seeing attempted here today. I go along with Councillor Newman. I think everyone in here does their fair share. I think it's wrong, disingenuous to suggest otherwise. The wards are very different. I don't want this to become a meeting attendance assessment of councillors. It'd be a lot easier for me just to come in and tick all the meetings, but the unfortunate reality is I've actually got a lot more important things in my particular ward that I should be dealing with that are way more significant than a number of the workshops and meetings that I'm almost feel compelled to attend. So I hope that point hasn't been lost in all this. But I just would say, Mr Chair, that this kind of attempt to denigrate or question one particular councillor who is incredibly active in his ward, who has a very difficult ward, I find a little distasteful. I don't want to go there. That's, as Member Henare said, that's something if people really have a concern with it. See the person outside of the meeting if you're really serious about it. Don't bring it up and waste our time in here. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I haven't heard anybody denigrate or usher words that could be construed as being a denigration of that member. Not here today. I haven't heard anything. If there was, I would seek withdrawal of those words. I've not heard anything of the like. Councillor Hills.
Just quickly. Look, everyone is saying we shouldn't be debating this, but everyone's debating it. So, I don't think this is a conversation we should be having in public, but to be honest, the first time I heard any of this was in the NBR, some serious allegations about committees that I'm on. So I think that despite this email being in here, it was actually in the media prior to it coming here. And actually on one of our committees, staff had to spend 10 days dealing with an issue that was in that media statement. So this is separate but connected, and it affects all of us if we're all having to sit on, go on different committees and things like that. So although I don't want to be debating this, I think it affects us all when things change within committees and when things are said in the media and on social media. So yes, so I support Wayne Walker's, Councillor Wayne Walker's appointment to this, but I also support the discussion because I think if it wasn't put out there in the media first, we probably wouldn't have discussed it. But when serious things were said during this process of coming off committee.
I think we're getting off track.
Thank you. Okay, just keep an eye on the motions before us, and councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think we're moving all over the place, because I think the suggestion was that there be just the councillors and list the committees they're on. That I thought that was the suggestion, and I mean, and I mean, look, we already end up getting the times and everything else that we attend workshops and committees now.
Crazy.
I think I'm sort of around the middle or lower part of the attendance. But I've got no issue at all if there is something that goes out saying, here's the councillor and this is the committees they're on.
This is not the committee to initiate it.
Can I finish? And at least, I didn't interrupt you, councillor, so I'm just going to finish. So I've got no problems at all if that is the suggestion and it goes through. Simple as that.
Thank you.
You can interrupt now if you want.
No, I've got to go to the mayor's meeting.
Sorry, I'll go now to finally councillor Cooper, then we'll just
thank you. And if I'm very pleased to support councillor Walker. If he can do the work on structure planning in places like Warkworth, Kumeu, Huapai, Riverhead, Dairy Flat, Hatfields Beach, Waimaku, Algies Bay and Helensville and Wellsford, that is all coming up, and he's been a former he's been a former Rodney councillor and he understands that. I'm very happy because it really does need local knowledge, because these are significant developments in former rural areas that will need very careful planning. So I'm pleased that you know, if we can't get the person that lives there, we can get somebody very close. So very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Close that debate. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Would somebody like just to move the 14?
I'll move.
Second.
Councillor Cooper, Councillor Bartley, second. I think that's procedural. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no.
Aye.
Carried.
I actually had a question for
A question.
I'll just,
Why I put my hand up.
just hold. Sorry.
I didn't say aye either.
Question from councillor. I'll go back. I didn't say carried, so councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask about, in the attachment, there's Tamaki redevelopment, and I wanted to ask about the oversight of Tamaki redevelopment, and how we have oversight over what's happening with the Tamaki redevelopment, because I attended the opening of some houses there with the mayor, and they were celebrating the changing face of Tamaki, which I felt offended by, because it was insensitive to the communities that once lived there. And knowing that this company is 49% Auckland Council, but I am comforted by the things we passed in the Auckland Plan about changing needs and preferences around housing and ensuring secure and affordable homes for all. That is a relief in terms of what's happening. So, yeah, I really want to know what's happening with oversight, because who are we building for?
Okay, what I will ask the staff to do, because this item is not supported by staff, and we don't have, even though the Director of Strategy is here, we don't have the people at the coalface of that. So what I'd like to do is just ask for an email to be distributed. Is that comfortable with Mr. Quinn? Mr. Quinn will distribute an email about the current status of our oversight of the company, and there are changes afoot, as you well know. So we'll get an email to all members on the current status and changes being mooted by government.
Good question.
Thank you very much. It's moved and seconded. Do I have? It's moved and seconded. Councillor Cooper, Councillor Bartley, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. I think we're complete. I'll just check. Thank you, members. Appreciate your attendance today, participation, contributions. Declare the meeting closed.